I'll be there. My life with the Four Tops. Forward. Most singing groups don't stay together for a lifetime, but the Four Tops did. Not until Lawrence Payton, Obie Benson, and Levi Stubbs sang their last notes did we change our lineup. Now I'm the last top left alive to tell our story, and I've asked myself, why me, and what kept us together for so long? In my view, most of it was out of our hands. Something bigger was at play from the very beginning. In the middle of the 20th century, worlds were colliding, times were changing, and people were ready for a message of love and togetherness, and they could get that from music. The Four Tops were a part of that, and maybe because of who we were, a band of brothers who stuck together, known for our melodious harmonies, we were ones to sing it. My voice wasn't the one out in front, but none of us wanted all the glory. We weren't the most famous group in the world, but we were famous enough. When we first set out to make it in show business, it was a good thing we didn't know how hard it would be. In the early times of your life, everything is fresh. Every road you take is a new one, and you have no idea where it's going to lead. When you look back, you can see where the rubber hit the road, but at the time, we just kept going. Along the way, I felt protected by some force greater than me. Starting early in my life, several seemingly unrelated events helped navigate my direction. They occurred as visions, in dreams, and in visitations, and when the members of our group eventually met, first Levi and me, and then Obie and Lawrence, the events I envisioned came to pass. A significant secret to our survival, as well as our success, was our shared belief that the sum was greater than the parts, and that time would be on our side. We knew that from the beginning, and we held fast to it. We were four totally different guys, but we had a love for the same thing, and that's basically the whole story. Four guys from Detroit who came together because of our love of music, love of entertaining, and love for each other, and we stayed together longer than any group of our era. I believe the great orchestrator chose the four of us because our names represent four corners of the world. My name is Abdul Fakir, which is Muslim. Obie's name is Ronaldo Benson, from the Spanish world. Levi Stubbs' name is from the Jewish world, and Lawrence Payton is as English as you can get. Now, as I go it alone, I know our story is bigger than me. It's not my story, it's God's story. There's a reason he put us together. To show, first of all, that love conquers everything. We loved singing together, living with each other, working together, and sending that love out into the world. It was always about love. In the beginning, we didn't give a shit about nothing except singing. We drove all the way across country without reverse in the car, headed toward our dreams, and there was nothing stopping us. We went full tilt toward the pinnacle of success, not chasing the buck, chasing the dream, and we made it together. Still, the journey was different for all of us. Chapter 1: The Road from Home. Whenever I tell my story, I start with my father. I was told he was born in 1900 in East India, now known as Bangladesh. He was a devout Muslim and a wonderful father. As a young man in Bangladesh, my father had been a street singer and a maker of sitars. He eventually earned enough money to get to London, England, where he worked as a cook and chef, chasing his dream of getting to America to work in the car factories. He'd heard that any able-bodied man, no matter his skin color, could get a good job there and earn equal pay. Once he saved enough money, he booked passage on a freight boat to Windsor, Canada. Standing on the banks of the Detroit River, he looked across the 40-foot deep, 3.5-mile body of water and dove in. He battled the river's swiftly moving undertow to reach the Motor City, and he made it. In my life, I was to repeat a similar journey, battling seemingly insurmountable obstacles to make it in the music business. Like my father, I overcame them. This was due in part to my unique background in both the Islamic and Christian faith, which rooted me in faith and spirituality. My mother, Ruby Leon Eckridge, was born in Sparta, Georgia in 1914. She moved to Detroit with her parents and her 6 sisters and brothers in 1925 during the first Great Migration, which saw millions of African Americans move to the industrial North seeking opportunity. She met my father in Detroit as she and her younger sister, Liller, were walking past a pool room in the neighborhood. My father and another Indian gentleman, Mr. Udden, caught their eye and struck up a conversation that ended up in 2 marriages and 13 children between them. Although my parents were from different parts of the world, different races, and without a common language or culture, they both believed in the American dream. Both wanted to raise a family in peace and prosperity, and both were deeply religious, musical people. They rented a house early on and had 6 children, 3 boys, Azim, Abdul, Omar, and 3 girls, Aladhi, Shazan, and Fatima. I was the 4th born, and my mother nicknamed me Dookie when I was a baby because she said I was a little shitter. Once I started school and heard the reaction, I quickly became Duke. Using any nickname irritated my father because I ceased using my real name, Abdul, which represented the Muslim culture. Soon my parents' religions began to clash. My mother was a devout Christian who later became a minister. She played the piano and was director of the choir in the church that her father founded, Oak Grove AME. My father must have moved to the same neighborhood she lived in as a young girl because he married her in 1930 when she was 16. Her father helped him get a job at the Briggs Manufacturing Company, the automotive factory my grandfather worked in. The owner of the factory, Walter O. Briggs, began as a laborer in the railroad business, then worked his way up in the car industry to eventually supply auto bodies to Ford and Chrysler, as well as other companies in Europe. His story must have been quite an inspiration to my Indian immigrant father and my African American grandfather who migrated to Detroit from the South, an immigrant himself, a recent transplant from the South, both proud to be a part of America's burgeoning wartime economy. I adored my father. When I was little, from age 3 until I was about 5, I used to sleep with my mother. My father worked the afternoon shift and didn't come home until midnight or 1 in the morning. I'd go to bed, sleeping and not sleeping, waiting for him to come home. He would always bring a Coney Island hot dog home for me, which I'm crazy about to this day. I'd be waiting for him to come through the door, and hung on his every word. The North End in Detroit, which is where we lived, was a racially mixed community, a mix of black, white, Polish, Jewish, Indian, and Italian. My father became very close to Uncle Udine, who married my mother's sister. They made their home right behind my granddaddy's church, where Uncle Udine conducted religious classes about the Islamic faith. On Sunday mornings, my father would meet me after church services in his beautiful white suit and hat to take me to study his religion and the Bengali language. I learned a few words and phrases before my mother stopped him. She wanted her children to be raised as good Christians. After that, he would show up in church screaming, "Get my kids out of there! Jesus Christ, my ass!" and they would throw him out. So my parents eventually separated and divorced. I was about 7 years old and remained at home with my mom and the rest of the kids, but I remember his early influence well. Unfortunately, my experience with Islam was short-lived. After my father lost the battle for my religious soul, I was raised in Oak Grove, AME. I'm a devout Christian, but I am a product of my father's Islamic religion too. The two religions are inside of me. The Islamic faith is about peace and love, like Christianity. The main difference is that Muslims don't believe in Jesus Christ as the savior of all men. Nowadays, there is division in the world, and we're taught that Muslim people are very different to us, or that there is something about Muslims that we shouldn't like. But being a true Muslim is nothing like the crazy, fanatical believers you hear about now. That is not the Islam I know. Under my mother's musical supervision, I started off singing in the baby choir, then graduated to the junior choir and eventually the senior choir, which consisted of most of my siblings and cousins too. We all lived in the same neighborhood, and our 3 families made up the whole junior choir. Singing in the choir wasn't an exceptional thing to do in my family, and I surely didn't have the best voice. 2 of my sisters could outsing me. We all loved it though. It came with the territory, as well as helping out at home and doing household chores since my mother worked during the day. I helped Shazin do the dishes, the family wash, and running errands. We always sang when we worked. At night, after homework and on weekends, we would play checkers, cards, and Scrabble together. I didn't see as much of my older brother, Azim, since he went to live with our father when my parents split, but he kept our family's musical tradition alive, playing saxophone and eventually starting his own group. Even though music was a constant presence in our lives, I didn't realize that I had been given a musical gift until an otherworldly figure came to me while I was in a state of deep despair. She shared her vision of my future, that I was put on this earth to sing. I was just 8 years old. One day, my mother singled me out during choir practice. "Duke, you have a beautiful voice," she said. "I want you to sing a solo." I never liked singing alone. "Mama, I don't really feel like that," I told her. "I just want to sing in the choir." I loved choir music, all the voices blending together in perfect harmony. But perhaps, among all her children's voices, Shed heard her youngest son's had a special quality to it. She persisted. "Dookie, you're going to sing this song. Your voice is too pretty not to." She made me learn we are Heavenly Father's children, and He knows just how much we can bear. That Sunday, I stood up in my grandfather's church and looked at all the faces staring at me. My mother proudly announced that her son was going to sing a solo. I made it through the first verse and started into the chorus when I froze. I didn't feel frightened. I just couldn't sing another word. I started crying and sat down, embarrassed and humiliated. Mercifully, my mother directed the choir to pick up where I left off, and they finished singing the song. When I got home, my mother was angry and confused, demanding to know why I'd stopped singing. I had no real explanation. All I could say was that I couldn't help it. I didn't know why I choked up. "Well, next Sunday, you're going to sing that song and you're going to finish it," she told me. End of subject. That following Sunday, I was still nervous, but I didn't want to disappoint my mother, so I reassured her that I was ready. This time, I even closed my eyes so I couldn't see the people looking at me. At the exact same point in the song, I choked up again. I started sobbing, looking directly at my mother, who I knew I'd let down. I dashed off the choir stand beside the pulpit where my grandfather was presiding, ran straight down the aisle and out the front door. Standing on the sidewalk in my little white choir robe, sniffing, the sounds of the service wafted outside. I asked myself why I couldn't finish one simple song, and then I noticed an interesting lady walk by, wearing a white headdress. She was dressed like a nurse in the church who attended to people who fell when they got the spirit or were overcome. As she walked by, she stopped and looked at me really hard. Then her eyes seemed to take in more than just me, like something bigger was filling her vision, and she kept on looking. "Son," she said in astonishment. Yes, ma'am. You sing, don't you? I try, but that's why I'm out here. I was singing a song and I just couldn't finish. I could barely speak, holding back my tears, and before I could finish telling her what happened, she interrupted. Oh my God, she said, her face lighting up, eyes glowing. Look at all the angels around you. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. There's angels all around you, son, she said in amazement. What do you mean? I kept searching the air, trying to see what she did. She went on, half talking to me, but more absorbed in what she could see plainly and was a mystery to me. Do you know that the world is going to love your music? My music? Just listen, you're going to be singing for people everywhere. This was even more confusing. I couldn't even get one song out. As she started walking away, her last words to me were, always remember that love is your answer. I watched as her flowing white robe and headdress disappeared in the distance. I wanted to follow and ask more questions, but I stayed rooted in front of the church, now even more confused by what had just happened and my earlier failure to finish the song. Now, I often think about what she said, about her prediction of my future, and the host of angels she saw surrounding me. She seemed amazed by them, but their existence has proven true, or else I wouldn't be here to tell the story. All throughout my life, I have felt a presence. Even as a child, I knew there had to be some special forces watching over me. There is no other explanation for my protection in what have been extraordinary circumstances, or for the spiritual guidance I've been blessed with, which has come precisely at the right time and place over and over again. After my encounter with the lady in white, the angels must have started working overtime. A few years later, a young friend of mine, Melvin, who lived near me in the North End, tried to convince me to skip school with him. We were living on Horton Street, and there were freight trains that ran nearby on the other side of East Grand Boulevard. Duke, come on, let's skip school tomorrow and jump on them trains, Melvin said excitedly. The idea of hopping a train and riding on top of the world was thrilling to me. Ooh, I said, that sounds exciting, but I had never skipped school before, and it made me uneasy. As I was getting ready to leave the house the next morning, something deep inside me said, boy, you go to school. While I contemplated what to do, as plain as day, the voice inside me said, go to school, boy. I had no idea where that voice came from or whose it was, but it was strong enough to make me take a step back. When Melvin met me on the corner, ready to embark on our adventure, I apologized. Nah, man, I better go to school. I lived only a half block away from Palmer Elementary. It's too close to home. Maybe next time. I wasn't sure if he'd go without me, but I went to school and put it out of my mind. Later, as I walked home, I saw some kind of commotion up ahead. A large crowd was gathered, with fire engines, police cars, and an ambulance. Someone spotted me and waved me over, saying, Duke, you know your little friend Melvin? He fell off a train and got ground up, crushed so bad they could barely recognize his body. I was so shocked and hurt, I cried like a baby. That was the first time I seriously considered my encounter with the lady in white and what she'd said to me about the angels. That's when I started believing that I was protected in some kind of way, and I started listening to those inner voices. My maternal grandmother, Amanda, was the other person who singled me out when I was a child and made me feel special. She instilled a strong work ethic in me. From the time I was big enough to pick up a mop or broom, every Saturday she paid me to clean her floors. She made me go to the shed behind the house and cut up wood for her pot-bellied stove or run to the store to buy groceries. She picked me even though I had 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and she had other grandchildren, all of my cousins on my mother's side. They all lived closer to her, across the street and around the corner, but she picked me to run her errands although I lived a couple blocks away, maybe because I was friendly. I was a nice kid and never complained. My mother boasted that she never had a problem out of me, and from early photos of me in the choir, I seemed to have a sweet, angelic face. Whatever it was, my grandmother's love and her singling me out helped build my confidence, which served me well, especially when I faced challenges and setbacks later on in life. My mother and grandmother's early lessons in hard work proved useful at school too. During World War II, patriotism was in full swing, and I was as patriotic as they got. Twice a year, week-long paper drives were conducted to collect old newspapers and magazines to recycle. Paper was needed to pack weapons and equipment to ship overseas. I led the drive at my elementary school and was proud of the stacks and stacks of paper piled high in the schoolyard. I was even prouder when our school won an award for our contribution to the war effort. My enthusiasm for school was so great, I'd arrive 10 minutes early just so I could be the first one there. One day, the principal noticed me outside waiting. Abdul, why are you out here so early every morning? I didn't really have much of an answer. I just smiled happily and said, I'm just ready to go to school. Tell you what, she said, impressed. I'm going to make you the flag boy. You can raise up the flag every day. Once again, I felt like I was singled out, that I was special. I knew that my father loved the United States and treasured being a recent citizen. Now his son was in charge of raising the country's flag. I was a proud American kid who enjoyed school, my childhood, and most of all my home. Our house was full of love. I knew my mom worked really hard to take care of us, so I tried hard not to give her any trouble. After my initial aborted attempt at singing a solo, I began to really love music and was disappointed when the director of the school choir informed me that my voice wasn't good enough to sing that year. Once again, I was devastated because of something to do with music, and I ran home to tell my mother. She just smiled and explained that my voice was changing. She reassured me that by the next year it would be all right. She was right. After my adolescence passed and my voice changed, I joined the choir again. At the time, neither she nor I had any idea just how much music would mean to me. Although, when a doctor recommended that my tonsils be removed after I contracted tonsillitis, I flatly refused. I don't know why. I just felt like it might change my vocal quality somehow. Something was telling me no, and I said to my mom, "Please, don't let them do that, Mom." She listened to me. At Pershing High School, I began competing in sports, and I went out for the basketball, football, and track teams. I began to concentrate more on athletics than schoolwork, which I took for granted because I was pretty smart. I got good grades in all my classes, especially chemistry. As a kid, I got great gifts for my birthday and Christmas, which were a day apart, and one year I was given a chemistry set, which I loved. The subject just came to me naturally. I easily picked up on the different signs, equations, and formulas. Whatever the teacher put on the board, I could understand. Because I wanted to go to college, I took the college preparatory class in chemistry. In the third week, I lost my book. At this point, my family was very poor. My mother had remarried, and my stepfather injured his back on the job at the American Cinder Block Company, and he couldn't work without help. I tried to help him before I went to school, starting at 4 o'clock each morning. I would then run to my classes and go straight back afterwards at the end of his shift. Our family was struggling to make ends meet, and I didn't want to tell my mom I'd lost my book or ask her to pay for a new one. So I decided I would have to do as well as I could without a book. I never even told my teacher. I don't know why, but I totally enjoyed the challenge. Later, I relished the idea that I got through the whole class without a book. I didn't get an A, but I was proud I managed to get a B. More than anything, this was further affirmation that I could overcome any challenge if I just stuck to the task and worked hard enough. While I was at Pershing High my first year, I really started missing my dad. I told him so, and he said, "Come stay with me for a little while." So I moved into his place, and we actually slept in the same bed. We had some good conversations. He would talk to me about the Muslims here in America. He did not want me to get affiliated with them. In fact, I think he even mentioned Louis Farrakhan as a young man, because he was just starting to preach about Islamic stuff in Detroit. I listened to everything my dad said, and I really enjoyed being with him. The only challenge was that in 1953, there was a major bus strike in the city. He lived at Verner Highway and John R., which was 7 miles away from Pershing High School. I walked down Woodward 7 miles every morning and then walked east another good half a mile, and it didn't bother me at all. I wasn't thinking about the journey. I had things on my mind as I walked, hoping and dreaming. I still got to school early, because to me being on time is late. After school, I walked all the way back. I did that for a whole week, and I didn't mind one bit. Being able to spend time with my dad was all that mattered. Back then, the things that motivated me were family, sports, school, and music in equal measure. But music began creeping in slowly and taking over. How could it not? Everyone in Detroit was caught up in the rhythm. Music was in the air. It was on the street corner, in your church, blaring from passing cars, drifting out of houses, in every restaurant, bar, dry cleaners, bowling alley, or skating rink, on people's lips, crackling on transistor radios. Even the assembly lines in the automotive plants hummed in unison. Cash registers jingled and jangled on Fridays louder than any day of the week, and on Sunday mornings the joyful cries of Amen and Hallelujah rung out in every black neighborhood, from the riverfront all the way to 8 Mile Road, where the city spilled into the suburbs and white folks were nodding to the sounds of the city too. There was a doo-wop group on every corner and talent shows nearly every week of the year. Growing up in Detroit in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, music was a part of your DNA. It was as natural to us as breathing. Everybody knew the names of all the popular artists and musicians who either hailed from Detroit or hung out there so long it was like home. Jackie Wilson, Della Reese, Nat King Cole, Billy Eckstine, Sammy Davis Jr., Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, they predominated the music scene. Of all the acts, I gravitated towards those playing standards and popular music songs from the Great American Songbook, like Eckstine and Sarah Vaughan. When a black artist played in Detroit, they were often booked at the Paradise Theater on Woodward Avenue, a concert hall built in 1919 for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra that became an important venue for black rhythm and blues and jazz artists in the 40s and early 50s. It looked like a majestic palace or temple, and it boasted perfect acoustics. One night, as a young kid of 13 years old, I made my way to the Paradise to hear the lineup. Lucky Millender's big band was playing, and they announced they had a young guest singing with them, Levi Stubbs, who was definitely going to be a star. He was 11 years old at the time, and Jackie Wilson's first cousin. When he started singing, I was blown away. Shit, this boy can really sing. He left an indelible impression on me. I made a point to go meet him after the show, not knowing that in a couple of years our paths would cross again, and we would become great friends. There was so much beautiful musical talent coming out of Detroit's ghetto in that era. It was like a blooming garden. I went out for the school choir when I first started at Northern High, where I went for my first semester of high school before I transferred to Pershing. Their choir was really good, and I was excited to join. At the start, the choir teacher tested all the voices and rated us in terms of our musical knowledge and vocal ability. In the tenor section were 4 first tenors, just like musicians in an orchestra section, then 4 second tenors, etc., up to 5. I was the number 2 tenor in the first section. The number 1 tenor was a good-looking, confident guy who could read music and had perfect pitch. I was a bit intimidated by him since I couldn't read music that well. We were learning Handel's Messiah for Christmas, and I was stumbling through, observing him singing the tenor part so beautifully that it seemed effortless. Who is this sucker? I said to myself, a bit jealous and totally in awe, but at the same time I was learning from him. He was encouraging. You catching up, he said. You'll get it. Years later, as I moved up in my singing career, I realized that guy in the Northern High School choir with me was George Shirley, the first black tenor to sing a leading role in the Metropolitan Opera Company. When I passed through New York in the 60s, I'd see his name up on the Met Opera House marquee as lead tenor. I found a way to get in touch with him and we met up backstage. George recognized me and said laughingly, "Oh, you were that motherfucker who was stumbling over those notes. You're one of the tops. You're doing really good for yourself." I was happy to let him know I wasn't a total loser. It was nice to think back to where we both started and where we came from, that we were the number 1 and number 2 tenors in the first tenor section of an all-black high school. Who would have thought that 2 young black guys from the Detroit ghetto could go so far? I met up with Levi again after my family moved from the North End to Conant Gardens, which is when I transferred to Pershing High, where Levi was also a student. Although Levi didn't compete, when the track, football, and basketball teams went to games, he would ride on the bus with us and lead everybody in singing, like a pep rally. He got the coaches to sing, as well as the members of the team, and that's when we started to get close. But it wasn't until we survived a horrible gang fight that our deep friendship began. Before moving from the North End, I had joined a gang, the Shakers. I joined because my big brother, Azim, was a member. I was still a little young, they called me a little shaker, and I wasn't fully aware of what being a gang member meant. When my brother left for the Air Force and when we moved to the new neighborhood, I became a member of the local gang there, the Gigolos. As a gigolo, I never joined in with the fighting. I was a good guy and managed somehow to ease my way out of fights and spend all my time playing sports. But when Azim returned home from the military, someone in the Gigolos got wind that we used to be Shakers, their arch enemies. One night, leaving a party with Azim, Levi, and a few of our friends, 30 or 40 of the Gigolos jumped me and my brother. They heard we'd been members of their rival gang and they were outraged. They started kicking my butt right behind Pershing High School. We were getting beaten pretty badly, but there were so many of them against Azim and me. It was hard for Levi to help us. Everyone was fist fighting until one guy threw me up against a car and broke a Coke bottle in full gang rage mode. He was about to stab me in the face when Levi grabbed his arm, pleading, Nah, man, please, don't do that. Just fight him, beat him up, but don't do that." Levi was the kind of guy everybody liked. He stood apart from everything, always on the fence, keeping his distance from violence and gang wars. But he stopped this guy from busting me in the face with a broken bottle. The dude threw it away, but he continued kicking my ass. By the time they finished, I was on the ground, scarred up, barely able to move, crawling on my hands and knees. My brother was hurt pretty badly too, and he wanted revenge. "I'm going back to North End and getting some Shakers. We're going to get these guys," he said, hauling me to my feet. I wasn't opposed to it, but I was beaten up so badly that he took me home to lick my wounds while he drove over to the North End. When he came back with the Shakers, he picked me up, and we all headed over to Joanne's restaurant where we knew the Gigolos were hanging out. Of all people, Levi was the first guy to walk out of Joanne's. One of the Shakers, a real tough guy, 2 knives Penniman, whipped out his 2 knives ready to stab Levi, when this time I stepped in and yelled, "Nah, don't do that. That's my guy. The guys we want are in the restaurant," pointing to the door of Joanne's. As they ran inside, I grabbed Levi and jumped back in the car, freaked out, still quaking from the earlier fight. Azim knew I was too injured to take part in another brawl. My face was bleeding, I had cuts on my knees, scars I still have to this day, and my pants were all torn up. My brother told me to go home, promising me that he'd finish it off. Levi and I left the scene of the big gang fight and ran back to my house, which was just a block or 2 away. From that day on, Levi stayed with me and my family. His family's apartment in the project was too crowded, and my house had a basement where we could spread out and make our own living quarters. We lived there like siblings until after graduation. At first, it had been about the singing, but that night we saved each other's lives. The forces that brought us together seemed inevitable, and once again, angels seemed to be looking after me. Even now, I shudder when I think of how close I have come to disaster throughout my life. I somehow avoided failure, death, disfigurement, addiction, and even ending the life of someone I dearly loved. Azim had given me a .45 pistol to protect myself in case something like the big gang fight jumped off again. One day, I was in the basement washing clothes with my oldest sister, Shazin, and I pulled out my new gun, showing off. I had taken all the bullets out. Look, I said, look what A's gave me. I pointed it at her head and pulled the trigger. Click, it didn't go off. She reacted, pissed. Don't do that, Dookie, stop. It might have a bullet in there. Ain't no bullet in there, I said playfully, pointing it above me. I pulled the trigger again. Bam! A bullet blasted straight through the ceiling. It went clear through the house, out the roof. We were shocked. Thank God that bullet didn't hit me, she said, as we both stood there shaking. You almost killed me. I almost cried, thinking about how close I came to blowing my dear sister's head off. I'm still scared. The only sense I can make of it not happening is that there's a reason for me being here. A job I had to do. Something bigger than me, saving me for something. Even though I knew I was lucky and sensed that a higher power was looking out for me, it still didn't point me in the direction of what I should do with my life. Plenty of guys in my neighborhood gravitated to the street, joining gangs and hustling. But in 1954, as my senior year was ending, I wanted to go to college. I knew I would need a scholarship, so I approached Mr. Morris, who had been my basketball coach during my one semester at Northern. The white coach at Pershing High came up with no scholarship offers. Mr. Morris had admired my playing when I was on his team. With his help, I got an athletic scholarship to Central State in Ohio, a historically black college across the street from Wilberforce University. He encouraged me to go, but he was frank about the financial challenges. It's a very small scholarship, he said. You're going to need some extra money because this doesn't cover everything, but they'll be looking for you in September. Coach, if it covers anything, I'm happy, I said, determined to find a way. With the help of my mom, I set out to apply for city and state jobs to earn the extra money, but another opportunity quickly presented itself. Levi was still living with me, and on the streets he heard about a guy in Toledo, Welton E. Barnett, who was trying to put together a singing group to perform at the Walhurst Country Club in Littleton, Colorado. It seemed like a good chance to make some money, and we felt we could sing as well as anybody. So we got someone to drive us to Toledo to talk to Barnett, a very intelligent guy who published a small black newspaper. Barnett was interested in us if we agreed to back up his lead singer, some guy who had just gotten out of prison and may have been his boyfriend. This was okay with us, especially since the money was good, a couple $100 each for a one-week engagement. We went back to Detroit and recruited another singer, a guy named John, who worked with Jackie Wilson and had a great voice. The engagement was close to New Year's, and coupled with the holiday spirit, our expectations were high. This was our first professional job, and we were ready and excited. Barnett paid for our bus fare to Denver, and we checked into the YMCA, anxious to have our first rehearsal with ex-con, the lead singer, who was a real tall, big guy. All three of us younger guys sang background. Levi did baritone, I was tenor, and John filled out the bass end of the harmony. Ex-con learned 2 or 3 songs with us, one that everybody knew how to sing, but it wasn't long before Levi and I were exchanging looks. Damn, this motherfucker ain't no good. He was too loud on one song, on another he was too sharp. Some of them were okay, but our general feeling was, let's just get this over with and make some money. We knew we looked sharp that night in our rented formal white jackets and black pants. When we hit the stage, we started singing Good Night, Sweetheart, Good Night, and it sounded nice. The next song was good too. Then we launched into My Summer Is Gone, and ex-con started screaming, off-key. He was way over the top, with no stage presence. He sounded worse than he did in rehearsal, sharp, flat, and even louder. The manager of the Walhurst Country Club stood up in the middle of the audience, stopping us after just one verse of the second song. Hold it, he shouted. Get the fuck off my stage and don't come back. Get out of here. Levi and I were so embarrassed, but we looked at each other and knew exactly what the other one was thinking. Let's get the hell away from this motherfucker. Thank God Barnett had given us a few dollars. We rushed back to the YMCA, grabbed our stuff, and tried to catch a bus home, but it was too late. So we got up the next morning, totally deflated, took our little bags, which were just cleaning bags, and went back to the Greyhound bus station. Not until we were on the bus could we finally laugh, wondering how we could have gotten mixed up in such a mess. Many years later, after the Tops became a popular singing group, we ran into Welton E. Barnett again. He'd moved to California and made an interesting living getting hit by cars and suing for insurance money. He was so proud of his success, as well as ours. He always remembered that he had given Levi and me our first break. I put y'all in the business, he bragged, and we were grateful that that first catastrophe hadn't discouraged us. The whole experience in Colorado seemed like a joke. After Levi and I arrived back in Detroit, it was hard to admit to our friends and family that our first professional job had been a total failure, that we had been singing with an amateur ex-convict whose lover hired us to get his career going. I was still faced with the challenge of finding something to do after graduation so I could go to college. I could never have predicted that just 2 weeks later, Levi and I would be invited to sing at a local graduation party, and this time we would ask 2 guys who could really sing to join us, Obie Benson and Lawrence Payton.